You may proceed.
Thank you, Max. Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 1st, 2020. This is a virtual special meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to welcome everybody and call this meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. Thank you for being here. With that, I want to make roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills. You have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners. We can formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here. I'd also like to thank all those who are watching remotely. We appreciate that. Want to remind everybody we do go back to in-person meetings on March 15th. It'll be nice to see everybody's face to face at that time. We'll also like to thank those that have pre-registered to speak today, and that includes Carol Everhart of the Rehoboth Beach Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce, Dan Slagle, Executive Director of Rehoboth Beach Main Street, and also Cindy Lovett, citizen. Thank you all for being here, and of course I call on you for your feedback and input at appropriate times during the meeting. With that, I like to remind everybody about support documents that when they are available, they'll be embedded in the agenda. And you see there's nothing embedded in this agenda. That's because it wasn't available to the last minute. We apologize for that, but this has been ongoing for a while, and we will embed this presentation you see today into the agenda immediately after the meeting so that you can access it. You can also, of course, listen to the audio and video again if you choose to do that. With that, I'd like to identify that there's been no correspondence on this topic yet. We're hoping to get, obviously, introduce this today and then get feedback from restaurateurs as well as other groups and citizens. And brings me to the purpose of the meeting today. Purpose of this special meeting is to introduce a draft policy permitting restaurant use of outdoor dining areas on public space when certain criteria are met. I'd like to remind everybody that, goodness, we last looked at outdoor dining 6 months to 12 months ago. It's been a long time ago. And if you recall, when we last looked at it and came back, the city manager had investigated outdoor dining on a post-pandemic basis and indicated that she didn't think it was workable. And if you recall, I spoke up at that meeting and I said, well, let's try one more time to see if we can all work together and try to make it work. So that's where we're at today. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share this screen for a presentation. Here we go. Again, we last looked at it and the city manager said it was not doable. I said, let's look at it. So this is a presentation today, and the proposed policy in front of us today being introduced is a collaboration from 2 commissioners, the city manager and 3 staff members. And I appreciate everybody put a lot of time in this, and I'm very thankful for them doing that. I think we need to remember, just very briefly, we've been in 2 years of outdoor dining, 2 years of COVID. Basically, in terms of outdoor dining, we basically suspended a lot of the rules that we have. We suspended a lot of the permit compliance rules. We suspended size of restaurant rules. We suspended ADA compliance, essentially, and other things. So now with 2 years of outdoor dining experience behind us and the return of indoor dining back to 100%, for instance, we find it necessary to create some guidelines based on the past 2 years, and that's what we're doing here, and that's what we'll be presenting to you. So I think the easiest thing would be for you, there is a slide number in the lower right corner. It's not always visible, but if you have any notes, I suggest you write them down, and the preference would be you wait till the end of the presentation after Patrick and I finish, and then we'll open it up to the commissioners, and then we'll open it up to the members of the public to comment. For outdoor dining on public space, the applicability, again, this is our proposal we're presenting to you. Applicability for us is for restaurants only, not for retail stores, by example, just for restaurants which meet certain criteria. So we need to take a look at our definitions first. Now, these are all definitions that are specific to Rehoboth. We're not using state definitions. We're using definitions specific to Rehoboth Beach. And so the applicability is this applies outdoor dining to restaurants. Restaurants are establishments that have prepared and served meals on the premises, regardless of whether they serve alcohol or not. They can serve alcohol or they don't need to serve alcohol. But this is the definition as it appears in our zoning code that we are using within this policy. Continue with definitions for a while. City-owned sidewalks, excluding the boardwalk, are the examples of the public space we're talking about. The outdoor dining area on public space specifically is designed as permitted outdoor dining area on a portion of a city sidewalk. Sidewalk is very important to talk about here. Pervious surface parallel to the street between the curb line and a property line intended for pedestrians. Well, that's kind of the basis of part of our formula. And we want to highlight that there is a buffer area between the outer edge of the pedestrian access route that we'll define next, and the curb line. The buffer areas usually contain your obstacles like tree wells and trees and signs and parking meters and benches, etc. So that brings us to the definition of a pedestrian access route. Most of us would just call it a sidewalk, but we're getting a little more specific here. Pedestrian access route, or PAR, is the primary pedestrian way within a sidewalk, defined by parallel sides and free of obstacles. So in this example, we've got two parallel lines here that are free of obstacles. That's the main pedestrian pathway. These are straight lines because one or more people tend to walk in straight lines. Now, by example, if the table was removed from this pedestrian access route would likely extend all the way to the building front. And if there was a planter here, then the lower edge of the pedestrian access route might butt up to the planter. Again, it's trying to define parallel sides, the area in between that's free of obstacles. Now, this terminology is not new to those that have followed the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force. It is a terminology that we've used with Rossi, and you can see pedestrian access route. It has a little diagram there and buffer area. So those are some new terms that we're using today. Sidewalk depth is part of our formula that you'll be learning about a little later. For the sidewalk depth, it's the measurement from the outer edge of that pedestrian access route to the face of the building or structure, excluding, of course, the buffer area. So from the outer edge all the way to the building facade is the sidewalk depth. Now, the sidewalk depth, if this building, for instance, was the facade was set back another 3 feet from the property line, then that sidewalk depth would increase by 3 feet and go all the way to the building front. So it's not predicated on property line, it's predicated on where the building facade or part of the structure begins. Outdoor dining depth. We're going to be talking about outdoor dining areas, of course, and we're going to talk about the permitted area and what the depth is going to be that's permitted, and that's just the maximum dimension parallel to the building facade on which a permitted outdoor dining area can be located. And you see a little diagram in that example. The permitted outdoor dining area depth is whatever showed there. Continue with definitions. We're going to be talking about a separation barrier with a little more definition explained later. But basically, it's a physical freestanding obstruction designed to define the dining area and constrain entry and exit to the dining area. On the leftmost picture, you'll see a railing system that looks like it's likely fastened to the sidewalk. And you'll see in our details, we're not allowing it to be fastened to the sidewalk. And on the two pictures in the middle and the right, you'll see what appear to be freestanding barriers. More of the idea that we're kind of contemplating there that does not attach to the sidewalk. Service aisle, as most of us know in wait staff, that is the open space between a table and chairs, and the separation barrier, we're defining it as at least 3 feet in width. And of course, it's used to access the tables and for servicing tables. So that brings us to the basis. I call these next bullets on the next several pages, personally, I call them philosophical foundations. They form the bases for the policy that we created. And some of the bases include indoor restaurant capacity has returned to 100% after the governor's lifted the emergency order. That's a fact. Pedestrians' use of pedestrian sidewalks is expected to return to pre-COVID density or greater. I personally expected crowds to really increase for this summer. People anxious to get out and come to the beach. And another basis is safe transit of pedestrians on the sidewalk, including circumnavigating the outdoor dining areas, is a priority. And following on that theme, that safe transit of pedestrians is a priority, there are 4 bases here that I think are important at the beginning to discuss. Use of full depth of the public sidewalk for outdoor dining is not going to be permitted anymore. You know, that's something that actually at one of our last meetings, the commissioners publicly endorsed. No more full width of the sidewalk. Another basis is use of parking spaces for pedestrian access routes is not going to be permitted. Well, they're not going to be needed if we don't allow full depth dining on the sidewalks. But regardless, we've said part of our foundational philosophy is that the use of parking spaces in the street is not going to be permitted. Similarly, parklets are in-street dining areas. We talked about that also. And we've said as a group that we don't want to go that direction, so they will not be permitted. And then split outdoor dining, you can see the picture on the right, are not permitted for this introductory philosophy policy. We just indicated that that's too complicated and the aisles tend to get constricted for whatever reason, additional reason. We've said that we're not interested in that. So some of the other additional bases for policy is that some of them kind of reflect and repeat what's in the definitions. So there is a little redundancy here, but for part of our basis, the PAR shall have parallel sides, no obstacles. It has to be ADA compliant. The restaurants must maintain a minimum pedestrian access route. The outdoor dining areas that we allow will need to be located up against the front of the building facade. Therefore, the pedestrian access routes are located toward the street side of the sidewalk. So those are some, again, some bases. And some of the last bases or foundational philosophies are that for restaurants located within a courtyard, alley, or mews, they don't get any outdoor dining opportunities on public space. They can certainly do it in their alley or mews or courtyard, but it wasn't intended to allow that on public space, unless they are one of the corner facilities or restaurants at an alley. Outdoor dining on public space is not intended to be on the boardwalk, so it's prohibited. And only, of course, those restaurants that comply with all the criteria that we present would be able to apply for this purpose. Outdoor dining areas on other than licensed property are not permitted and considered permittable for this policy that we're presenting today. And of course, foundational philosophy is we don't want any of the outdoor dining areas to become a nuisance, et cetera. So we move from those foundational philosophies that form the basis for our policies, and we get into what some of the policies are. We're going to start with some of the design standards for outdoor dining. And again, some of these are redundant because they come from the philosophies and they are repeated. So bear with me here a little bit. And I'll go through fairly quickly here. But restaurants need to, again, maintain the minimum pedestrian access route. The outdoor dining area is placed up against the facade. The dining area design has to be approved by building and licensing. We give you some illustrations. We are going to give you some illustrations on dining setups that are permittable. The pedestrian access route has to be completely clear of all obstacles, including tables, chairs, and other encroachments, and must maintain parallel sides. Again, this is a design standards that stems from the foundational philosophies. And again, the sidewalk depths are established by city building and licensing. So continue with the design standards. We're saying that the maximum allowable outdoor dining area is 750 square feet total, based on the sum of patio dining areas and outdoor dining areas. You recall right now for within zoning code 270-19, there is a maximum 750 square foot limitation on patios, one or more patios. The total is a maximum of 750. So we are saying that, suggesting that that applies also to the outdoor dining area. By example, if you already have 750 square feet of patio area, then you would not be allowed outdoor dining area. However, if you chose to reduce part of your patio dining because it's maybe on the back of your building or for whatever reason, and you reduce it to 400 square foot of patio dining, then you'd be allowed up to 350 square feet of outdoor dining area on public space. Another design standard is that separation barriers are required. For those that serve alcohol, they're familiar with alcohol barriers or physical barriers because the Alcohol Commission requires them, as do the City of Rehoboth Beach in our permit of compliance. So we're just reiterating here that whether you serve alcohol or not, you need to define the boundaries of your outdoor dining areas with the use of physical barriers. And we give a definition there of a physical barrier. It needs to be continuous and again, self-supporting without the use of attachments to the sidewalk. And it needs to be strong enough to withstand a wind or other strong pressures, or maybe even a person knocking into it. So that's separation barriers. With that, we go to table and chair placement. And rather than read all this, I think it's easier just to show you a diagram. Afterwards, you can go back and read that page if you choose, but the essential elements of that page that I skipped over are illustrated in this diagram. The table, whatever table configuration you have, two-seater or four-seater, it has to be up against the building facade or property line or the structure, whatever you have there, only two top and four top tables will be allowed. There's some maximum dimensions noted there that are illustrated there. Tables and chairs are oriented as shown, so that the chairs preserve a 3-foot clear open service aisle as shown there. And the specific seating design, of course, has to be approved by the building and licensing department. So again, these are permissible outdoor dining layouts for a two-seater and a four-seater. And you can see, we'll see at the next slide. I'm also going to skip over this because it's easier to just illustrate it. That again, the table layout permitted would be a 2-top or a 4-top. And the required dimensions for a 2-top is a minimum of a 6 foot distance here, or a required distance of 6 foot. That allows for a 2-foot cable, a 3-foot service aisle, and a 1-foot deep service barrier. And for a table for 4-foot table, 3-foot aisle, 1 foot yields a requirement or maximum of 8 foot depth there that's required to be able to have an outdoor dining utilizing a 4-top table. Part of the formula for, and the key to this largely is going to be the depth of the sidewalk. That again, we go back to our foundational philosophy, and it said pedestrian access is a key and a priority to all this. So what we have looked at is what are the minimums required for a 2-top and a 4-top table, 6 foot and 8 foot. Then we're also looking at a minimum pedestrian access route as determined by building and licensing. And they've determined with us that 7 foot, 8 foot, or 10 foot or greater is the minimum pedestrian access required to allow a 2-top or a 4-top against the building facade. So part of the formula here is minimum sidewalk depth is a sum of the minimum PAR plus the depth of the dining area. In this example, the minimum sidewalk depth here to allow for an 8-foot deep 4-top table would be in the third block, Rehoboth Avenue, is 7 foot. 7 foot minimum PAR plus 8 foot here is 15. So the minimum sidewalk depth is 15. Now this will become more clear as we do some illustrations later on. But again, this presentation will hopefully serve to educate those that go back and study it again after it's embedded in the agenda. So how do we get that 7, 8, and 10 foot dimensions there? I want to go back in a minute for a minute and just remind everybody that the origin of the 7 foot minimum sidewalk width comes from the streetscape. During the Baltimore Avenue streetscape concept, some of the objectives had to do with pedestrians. A lot of the objectives had to do with pedestrians, accessible walkways, widening some walkways for pedestrian traffic, increasing safe pedestrian travel, bringing more pedestrians onto Wilmington and Baltimore, establishing minimum sidewalk. And so during the concept presentation by Rossi, they presented concepts that accommodate a consistent 7 foot pedestrian access route throughout the entirety of the design concept. So that 7 foot became our minimum concept, our minimum PAR requirement that we used as our basis for this presentation today and for our proposed policy. From there, how do we get 8 foot and 10 foot? Well, we said the closer you get to the ocean, the more pedestrian traffic there will be. So we came up with an educated guess on what we thought would be the best scenarios there. We did try to look up in other manuals for any definitive guidelines on how to determine sidewalk width. And there we couldn't find anything. But generic references to sidewalk widths next to a sports complex need to be bigger, and next to a mall they need to be even bigger, and sports venues, etc. So we came up with the entirety of the commercial area, but for 2 areas need to have a minimum of 7 foot pedestrian access way there. Remember the 2 parallel lines, unobstructed, minimum of 7 feet there. In the second block only of Rehoboth Avenue, we increased it by a foot and said that needed to be 8 foot minimum pedestrian route. And in the first block only of Rehoboth Avenue, we said that's the busiest area of all the commercial, and that minimum pedestrian access route with the parallel lines and no obstructions needed to be a minimum of 10 feet. So if I were a restaurateur, how would I determine if my restaurant can have outdoor dining on public space? We're going to take you through a little example here. Number one, you identify the outer edge of your pedestrian access route. This is a line generally parallel to the street, which separates the main pedestrian route from the buffer. So we've got 3 examples here which show you that the outer edge here of the pedestrian access route touches the little buffer area here and street lights. An example here, the outer edge of the PAR is inset from objects that people interact with, such as parking meters, for instance, perhaps benches, trash cans. And then the outer edge of this example of the pedestrian access route touches our paver borders. So let's go through an example beginning to end. Number one, how do I determine if my restaurant can have an outdoor dining area on public space? Number one, identify the outer edge of the pedestrian access route. You can see the line there. That's the division line between the main pedestrian route and the buffer zone, which contains the obstacles. Number two, you would measure the sidewalk depth from outer edge of the pedestrian access route to the building facade of the structure. Again, the structure could be even with the property line. It could be set back 3 feet. But wherever that building facade or structure is, you measure to there. In this example, literally it is 17.5 feet in the 3rd block of Rehoboth Avenue. So we measured that. The third thing, what do? Is we kind of envision our dining area, 6 foot or 8 foot deep is required, as we said, for a 2-top or a 4-top table. We envision it there and we subtract either 6 feet or 8 feet from the sidewalk depth of 17.5 feet. And that yields, number 4, the balance of 17.5 minus 6 or 8 yields 11.5 feet, or 9.5 feet wide if using the 6 foot or 8 foot dining areas. And in this example, the minimum pedestrian access route is 7 feet. Thus, because the area is wider, if this were a restaurant, they would be allowed to establish an outdoor dining area, either 6 foot or 8 foot in depth. So again, this is new to everybody. It's a lot to absorb. We're going to continue, and I'm going to hand it over to Patrick to go over some rules and permitting. We've tried to present a package to you and realize that, again, this is a lot to absorb, but we're looking forward to getting feedback, not necessarily today as much as in the future, because we will be having our next meeting on this topic March 7th. And then it's also planned for March 15th and March 18th, so we can expedite. With that, Patrick, I'll turn it over to you. Do you want to screen share or have me keep my slides on?
If you would turn your screen share off, I've got one I'd like to share if possible.
There you go. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I see if I can screen share here. First off, let me bring this up if I may. Are we able to see that?
Yeah.
Okay, just to give you, some kind of put this in a little perspective of our background of what we brought up here was to see here that the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the city
it's not up yet. There's nothing on the screen yet, Patrick.
All right, well.
You have it open.
I did.
Okay.
But let's see. Well, it's open, but it doesn't seem to. Max, am I able to screen share here?
You should be able to.
know why I'm not able to do it. The document's open, but
Is it not appearing in the share screen?
no, it's not.
You could just share your desktop and then just display the presentation.
All right, let's see if I can do that.
There we go, Patrick.
Okay, that's where we go. How about, again, to start over here, is the background that we based our work on here is at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the city established this temporary emergency policy on outdoor dining on public spaces, which we didn't previously allow. But this allowed the restaurants to operate on the sidewalks next to their premises, including areas of the public space that had long been restricted from such opportunities. The program proved to be very successful and a critical lifeline for our restaurants citywide, as indoor dining limitations were severely reduced during their operations. So moving forward on that, the city took the action, and now we're taking the first step in creating a permanent program to expand our outdoor dining that is clear, predictable, organized, and equitable. This balances the health of our restaurants, and more importantly, with the needs and the safety of our visitors and residents. We're a very popular destination, and outdoor dining has certainly become very popular, and we want to continue that and expand that. But so what we're trying to do here is the city's taken the first step in doing this. So again, basing our thoughts and case statement of why we're moving forward with this and expansion is that, as we know, as of today, actually, 6 p.m. today, the governor's emergency order has been lifted, terminated for that aspect. And we know that guests have been returning to indoor dining as they are now fully 100% operational indoors. But we also have to look at the visitors, the residents, and the restaurants are enjoying outdoor dining. All of our public input and people calling me and stopping on the streets and what have you, that they enjoy the outdoor dining. And the city, we have to remember also that the city has had a successful outdoor patio dining for over 40 restaurants for decades within the city. There are at least 50% of our current operating restaurants have outdoor patios in the city. And this has really translated to tens of thousands of visitors enjoying outdoor dining, and we want to expand that a little bit more. But the past 2 years that we've expanded this onto the sidewalks, that was under, as the mayor had mentioned earlier, under temporary restrictions. But on February 16th of this year, the governor signed HB 290, which really provides for the legal consumption of alcohol at outdoor dining. Again, prior to that, it was all just on a temporary basis on the governor's emergency order, but now that has expired. So HB 290 really takes over in what is allowed from the ABCC on the outdoor dining. But then to close this in the sense of completing our thought process, the city has that responsibility to our pedestrians to provide a safe, accessible sidewalks. And past 2 years, they provided emergency walkways within the barriers into parking spaces. The feedback indicated that these walkways were not as safe and did not comply with the ADA requirements. And I can personally attest to that, as the macadam or blacktop ramps were not specific to ADA requirements. But again, during the emergency order of the governor, those were suspended. And we also know that the chamber and the Main Street and real estate offices have forecasted crowds this summer to be at pre-COVID levels or higher, meaning that we're going to have more crowded sidewalks. And during that 2-year period also, we have to remember that the city forfeited about 89 parking spaces with a loss in revenue of almost $250,000. So basically that's the issues or the thought process that we put together to move forward on expanding our current outdoor dining. So as the mayor had mentioned, there are some rules that are in place. And under this new policy, in order to provide, again, for the health and safety of our restaurant staff and the guests, the visitors, any restaurant that wishes to utilize public outdoor dining as an extension of their business will file an annual application for this use of that outdoor public space. And along with that, the applicants are required to submit drawings or a diagram of what they're going to look like. So here are the outdoor dining rules, which they include. And I've I know the mayor had quite a few of these in his presentation, but what I've tried to do here is kind of lump them into areas of, or topic areas. So to start off, the dates of operation, looking at outdoor dining, will be from April 1 to October 15th. When outdoor dining is closed for longer than 7 days, we ask that the operators remove all of the chairs and tables from the areas. The food and beverage service section of it, this all really originates in our current code of 27019, which talks about our restaurants and our patio operations. That food and beverage may only be served to seated patrons, no bar sections in the outdoor dining area, no food and beverage preparation done in the outdoor dining area, and the permitted outdoor dining area would be closed by 11, and all the patrons must vacate by 11:30. Then with regards to entertainment, again, drawn from our current codes governing restaurants, there should be no live entertainment in the outdoor dining area, no external speakers, amplifiers in the dining area. External speakers cannot be directed to the outdoor dining area. And then we also certainly strictly enforce Chapter 189, which is our noise ordinance. Then we talk a little bit about design and layout. Designing area on the public spaces, can't block public ways. We have to allow for pedestrian and vehicular traffic, and also related activities and prohibited. How you would affect your neighbors, basically. No operational items. If you've got hostess stands and menu stands, those type of things have to be within the dining area. The dates of the operation for outdoor dining areas in the public, no tables may be placed within 6 feet of a takeout window. Obviously know that there's a lot of crowding or takeout windows for French fries and soft serve ice cream and what have you, and it's just impractical to have tables that close. Also, as we noted earlier, some problems and challenges with blocking of entrances and ADA accessible areas. Obviously that can happen. We also need a minimum of 60 inches from the exit and entrances for any tables or placements of any items. Establishment using the outdoor seating on public sidewalks still have to readily identify the visible markers so that we know the exact areas that the border is going to encompass around the area that the tables, chairs, and service aisles will be placed. We're not going to allow any overhead wiring for lighting. We certainly allow candle operation on the tables, that type of thing. Outdoor dining on neighboring properties is not permitted since you don't own it. You can't do it. And then it's important to us the maintenance of the area. And just here, the sidewalks within or adjacent to the dining area should be maintained in a clean and orderly manner. Most of all of our restaurants certainly do that now, but as just part of the code here, we're policy, food and drink spills, trash cans immediately cleaned up, just to make it a nice dining area and a nice experience for the patrons of the restaurants. And finally, the last aspect of it is the permitted equipment. Directional signage, we certainly can have entrance here, exit here, this type of thing, but small, 2 square feet maximum. Umbrellas, 7 feet in vertical clearance, 8 feet maximum diameter, the same that have been in same restrictions, if you will, or guidelines that have been in place for the past 2 years. No tents or canopies are going to be permitted. And then we have the guidelines that have been in place for the past 2 years about the outdoor heaters. So this is kind of gets into the nitty gritty of it. But these are the guidelines and the applications that need to be followed by the applicants. It's up to the applicants to talk to building and license to see what best suits their needs for their location in the city. So Mayor, that's what I have.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Before we get to the commissioners, I want to thank you. And again, the outdoor dining team, if you will, city manager Sharon Lynn, Evan Miller, Howard Rothstein, Matt Janis, of course, you and myself. Two quick notes for the restaurateurs. We indicate that this policy would start, the proposal is that it starts April 1st and ends October 15th. The reason, of course, for October 15th is to get it to stop and clear up before Sea Witch comes to town. April 1st is just, we're anxious to get you started as soon as possible. We got to recognize, though, that April 1st is just around the corner. And having recognized that is why I tried to accelerate some of the meetings with the next meeting on this March 7th. March 15th and March 18th, and then we'll go from there. But recognize that even if we get this passed in a reasonable amount of time, You've got your time constraints for making application, time constraints and the burden on building and licensing. We'll try to turn them around as quickly as we can. But then if you serve alcohol, you've also got to forward it to the alcohol commissioner. Don't forget, they need some time to do it also. So it could be that the earliest that you can actually get something on the ground could be between April and May or something like that. So I just wanted a caveat there. Also, I wanted to share with you that there's two processes that we could do. We could, if we go forward with this, we could make amendment to the permanent compliant process. We could create a supplemental permanent compliance for outdoor dining on public space. But what that requires is presenting it, discussing it, go to public hearing. There's a lot of time involved in that. The alternative that I'm proposing is, and Patrick and our team's proposing, is to write up a policy and then adopt it through a resolution with a time constraint on it, saying, in fact, I'll show a couple slides here that maybe were omitted, that we want to do a trial period of this. And so that would give us an opportunity to get this in as quickly as possible under the auspices of a policy, and then give us opportunity to review it and tweak it. And then if we choose at that later date to codify it, then we can do that. If you don't mind, let me go back to a couple slides, Patrick. Effective dates, April. Enforcement, of course, is by violations, appeals, evaluation of policy. The commissioners in building and licensing, we would develop some criteria, and then at the end of summer, at some point, we would charge building and licensing with evaluating the program, and then coming back to us before the end of the year to evaluate if we want to do any changes, tweak, do we want to abandon it, do we want to enhance the program, do we want to codify it, etc. So we have that as part of our policy also. So with that, I know this is a very lot to absorb. Again, our next meeting is in under a week, March 7th. It will actually be during the workshop meeting, because we have a short workshop meeting and can add it in there. And so we're all willing to entertain questions now the best we can from commissioners, then we'll go to the public. And then, of course, we'll resume March 7th at the workshop. Commissioner Sharp, please.
I'm just absolutely thrilled, Mayor, to see along with Dewey, the city of Rehoboth Beach moving toward making these changes permanent and doing it in such a way that I think really takes a bad situation that we had to make these changes earlier, and really acknowledges how welcoming it makes our city and how popular it has been. And I think that what I've seen, I honestly thought it was very easy to absorb the way you presented it, you and Commissioner Gossett, the way you presented it, it's very clear what the parameters are to me. And businesses can choose to opt into this. And I think the foundation of making it easy to do business with the city of Rehoboth Beach is honestly a breath of fresh air. So I think what you presented thus far today, I only had one question, and that is, if you're seated in the outdoor dining area, can you order just alcohol, or is it always food and beverage?
Patrick, refresh our memory. I think within 270-19 use restriction for patios, which we've adopted here, it's you have to have, you can only be served drinks if you're also served a meal. Can you verify that, Patrick?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's also, there's language outlined in HB 290 that states you have to serve food along with the liquor. And I actually think there's a minimum amount of purchase outlined in HB 290 also. And it has to be in a closed container and things of this nature. So yeah, there are restrictions, but you cannot just drink, you have to eat and drink.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Tranowski and then Commissioner Legree.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the diligent job that you and others put on this. I just want to clarify. I think you earlier said that the city manager came back and said that outdoor dining just wasn't feasible. But I don't think that was the case. I think we decided then at the time that the only thing that we could do kind of citywide was 2 tops against the facade. And that's kind of what we agreed on then. So I just don't want the public to think that we left things otherwise back then. Also, you mentioned parklets. We, built a consensus that just wasn't feasible. And I don't remember coming to that consensus. And we have 2 new commissioners since that time. And I wouldn't want to completely dismiss the opportunities that parklets could provide. And I'm not saying I want to address it now, but I wouldn't mind looking at it again in the future. Now comments on the specific presentation. I certainly don't agree with limiting it to 750 square feet of outdoor space. We've got plenty of restaurants that have a smaller indoor footprint because they have an outdoor patio. And we've got places that have a larger indoor footprint without private patio space. So I certainly don't want to restrict how much outdoor space a business could have. Again, we're talking about the use of public space. Just because someone's already using their own private space, I don't think they should be uninhibited from using the public space. The dates, I don't agree with starting it and stopping it at certain dates. I think administratively, the city manager can say, hey, we've got a big event coming up this weekend. You can't have anything on the sidewalks, but otherwise we've got plenty of beautiful days in March, November, even December that, why not let people use the outdoor space if the day permits. I don't, would not want to have a go through a permit of compliance. I think we should do this administratively, have one resolution and have the application be administrative. And the only other thing I would add is there should be a minimal fee that businesses are paying for the application process. This is extra time it's taking for city staff. So $50, $100 application fee, I think, is warranted. And those are all my comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see what the other commissioners and the public say. I'm not going to address them individually other than as far as the rigid dates, be mindful that how we came up with that is because it reflects the current policy. If you recall, we tried to get rid of the on-sidewalk dining by November 1st so that we were prepared for the onslaught of winter and snow plows and all that stuff. So
yeah, the difference though, Mayor, is we at that point we had to remove barriers.
Right.
We won't have that.
All right, very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Legree.
Yes, I certainly appreciate the presentations. I'm hoping that they'll be available to download and go through by the end of the day. And certainly a lot of really good ideas, things that we've hashed out. And it won't take me very long to go through it, but it's good to make it available to everybody so that they can be giving us feedback by the time we get together and decide on a consensus or go forward. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gay.
Yes, first of all, thank you for all the work that went into putting this together. It seems like you've covered many of the details. And I'll just say my goal in this is pretty simple, and I even wrote it down as you were talking, which is let's make it permanent. And I understand this is a step in that direction, and that's great. One of the I had a few questions, and you sort of addressed it at the end when you said that this was a sort of another trial run, and that's when I wrote down let's make it permanent, because I'd like to be able to give the restaurant something to plan for the future, to know that we aren't going to change it again or go back on it or do away with it or whatever. But at some point, I guess we would codify it once this trial period is over, right? Would that be the idea?
Well, that would be debatable, which process we want to go. There are advantages to creating a supplemental permit of compliance. Remember, that would be a 2-permit system then. If you are a restaurant that sell alcohol, you would go through 1 permit process, versus what we're proposing right now is whether or not you sell alcohol, you apply for 1 single permit. That's it. So it's to be debated. I don't think we need to settle that right now.
Yeah. Because as I was going through it, there are places where the definitions you had in your slides differ from the definitions we currently have in our code. So at some point, I guess we'll, whenever it's codified, we'll want to, make those consistent, or have a separate section of the code that's just for dining, maybe includes both outdoor and own dining patios. I don't know, but it strikes me as something that ultimately should be codified as part of making it permanent.
Anybody else before we go to the public? If not, we'll go to the members of the public. We've got Carol Everhart of the Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. Are you there, Carol?
I am, Mayor. Thank you very much. It's when this came up, I went back and looked at the survey. You may remember we did an original survey. And since that time, I've had many conversations with several of especially the partnership businesses. There was definitely consensus that they wanted to continue the outdoor dining. There was still consensus that they understood one size was not going to fit all. There was going to have to be some kind of logistical plan here, a formula that everybody could go to and see it as being fairly implemented, but one size isn't going to fit all. They all agreed on the service aisle. They did not want the wait staff having to cross the sidewalk. And they also agreed with, there was a lot of questions about whatever kind of a barrier we were going to use around the serving facility. So when you say a temporary definition of where the serving area is, that made sense with everything that I've been told on that. I do want to talk about the dates, because the only reason that the Sea-Witch date came up at all was because we needed the street. It did not have anything to do with the sidewalks. So when you look at the dates of beginning and ending, I have to agree that there's a lot of nice days in March and through September and October and even into November. So originally we said as long as there was nice weather. November 1 seems reasonable. But I did not survey that date particularly. I just asked, what do you think? And the answer was, as long as the weather is well, we'd like to do it. But it does not impact Sea-Witch. I just need the street. The problem with Sea-Witch was we had the barriers in the street. It wasn't a sidewalk issue. It was a street issue. And other than that, I think you've looked at the logistics, the safety. I'd want to do another survey and get this out to them and see what they say. But I don't see anything other than the date that is, I expect to be of major concern.
Thank you, Carol. We appreciate it. We know this is new to everybody, so anything you can do to get the word out and get feedback would be appreciated. With that, we'll go next member of the public, Dan Slagle, Executive Director, Rehoboth Beach Main Street. Are you on, Dan?
Good morning. As a representative of RBMS, I'm thrilled that we are moving forward with the outdoor dining. I am very, very happy to see this happening. I share the same thoughts with Carol Everhart and the commissioners as far as this is a good thing. I have also been meeting with a lot of the restaurant owners and the public, and everyone wants this. Everyone wants outdoor dining. I also want to take a look at your presentation and, might have more questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Cindy Lovett, please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for taking up this important discussion. And I know how much work is going into presentations, and that took a while. A couple quick thoughts. One is a question on page 18, point 4. It said licensed property. How is that defined?
The intent there.
I can't hear you. What did I do wrong?
Testing 1, 2, 3. You there?
Okay, now I'm here. Thank you.
The licensed property is Patrick, help me out here. It's the property that accompanies the business license. So it's not. And for full disclosure, you are the current landlord of the Egg restaurant?
Yes, correct.
So you're probably likely referring to Egg utilizing the property next door would not be a part of this proposal or policy.
Okay.
Patrick, do you want to offer anything?
No, I think that it is a business license as the, whatever the business license reads of the property description on the business license. That's the city's aspect of how we recognize a restaurant or a property, if you will.
Okay, so that would be okay. I was wondering when drawing the lines as far as where the areas to be considered, do movable items like planters count into drawing those lines up at what's considered to be up against the building and the like?
Let me bring up a slide here real quick. Share screen. Hold on a sec. So here's an example here. Remember, we're measuring sidewalk depth from the outer pedestrian route inward. Here's an example here of the outer line of the pedestrian pathway being outlined. It touches the gravel area here, which is an obstacle. It touches the street light here, which is an obstacle. It's got a bench here that would say, in same situation here. Frankly, I would, if this planter was in the way or this trash can was in the way and impeded a restaurant, I think we would work our best to try to move it. So that's removable versus a parking meter that's fairly rigid.
Okay, so that can be worked out. I also agree with Commissioner Chernowski and everyone about the dates, particularly the north side of Rehoboth Avenue is so much warmer this time of year. In the spring and the fall, that it's very comfortable to dine on the north side. So I'm hoping the dates, will be worked out. One of the questions is for Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues, which are to me are the two streets that need this vibe of the outdoor dining more than anything. I suspect it's going to be sometime down the road before the streetscape is finished, which maybe will give them the ability to have outdoor dining. I was wondering if there's any sort of an exception that could be used for Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue, either consider parklets or some other way, because that vibe this summer of Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue just brought those two streets to life. And I hate to see that shut down until streetscape is done. So I don't know if something could be done on that. And then the other question is, given that nothing ever moves as quickly as you want it to, will current dining be allowed until this is implemented, the new rules are implemented? There are a couple restaurants that are having outside dining now, and would they be allowed to continue that? That's
Okay,
it.
Commissioner, go ahead.
I was just thinking, and I think Mr. Vandalis, you may also want to chime in here. I think the rules of outdoor dining are really now, with regards to service of alcohol, as mentioned, during the emergency order, those rules were suspended. Now with HB 290, basically there's a new set of rules, and the application for a liquor license for outdoor dining needs to be processed. So I think that really is the contingency or trigger for outdoor dining going forward. Mr. Mandalis?
I think that's right, Commissioner. House Bill 290, I think at the end of this month, now being March, House Bill 290 kicks in, and the new state regulations kick in. There's a new authorization from the ABC Commissioner and all of that. So that's, I think, why we're working hard to get this in place by April 1st, so that we can kind of pick up and try and not have too much of a time between when HB 290 kicks in and when we're able to be up and running. So I do think that at the end of this month, we need to be under a new set of rules to continue it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Candy. Appreciate it. Back to the commissioners. Any additional comments? Commissioner Srnowski?
Thanks, Mayor. Just to follow up on Commissioner Gay, I agree. We need to make this permanent. I don't see any reason why we need to have a trial period. We've already had outdoor dining for 2 years. We've experienced no problems with it. This is more strict and more outlined and more structured than it was in the past 2 years. So we can always tweak it for any reason at any time, but I think we just need to go ahead and make this permanent. And I just want to follow up on Ms. Lovett's question. She was asking about the sort of the property, and I just want to confirm, Mayor, because I think she was asking this, but I'm not sure, that this is only related to public space. The use of additional outdoor space on private property is no longer allowed unless we do something to change it. Is that correct?
Glenn, you can help me out, but I would say that's correct. We're talking, and you're exactly right. We're talking about utilization of the public, we'll say public space, public sidewalks in front of their store. But when this returns to normalcy for this summer, all the rules of the permanent compliance have to apply, and they do not have a license, permanent compliant license or permission or authority to use that lot next door.
That's right, Mayor. Just to follow up, I mean, we'll continue to have up to 750 square feet of space on private property for a patio permanent compliance. As the mayor said during the presentation, if you want to reduce your patio space on private property and utilize the public space for that same amount that you've reduced your 750 by, you can do that. But the idea is that if you're going to have dining on private property and you have area available to you as a restaurateur to do that, you go through the normal patio permanent compliance process to be licensed for that patio. This is addressing purely public space, but under the current plan, and the commissioners may want to discuss this, but under the current plan, if you utilize both your private space and the public space, so you have 2 outdoor dining areas, the maximum is 750 square feet.
Thank you. Anything else, Ed?
No, that's it.
All right, Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I don't want to slow things down here, and I understand it might take longer than just this month to fully codify everything. It's more of an intent and putting the message out that this is our intention to make this permanent and to work toward it. But I certainly understand why there may be some tweaks that are necessary and why you still call it the first step toward permanence. I do get that.
Anybody else? Commissioner Legree?
I agree with Commissioner Gay. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I see no more comments. Our next meeting is on this will be during our regular workshop on Monday, March 7th, beginning at 9 o'clock. And look forward to input. I'd like to remind everybody that Commissioner Gossett is the liaison to everybody in this topic. And that if commissioners have anything that they would like to share in advance of the meeting, to please send it to Commissioner Gossett. And I would say the same thing for members of the public. If you have anything you'd like to share ahead of time, and any specific questions you'd like answered during the next meeting, to share that with Commissioner Gossett. In the meantime, members of the public have the opportunity to send us correspondence, which if we receive far enough ahead of time prior to the meeting, we will embed in the agenda. So expect to see our presentations embedded in the agenda by the end of the day for your access. And I call this meeting adjourned.